Washington Square On Air is the audio town square for the Washington Square Review, Lansing Community College's literary journal. Writers, readers, scholars, publishing professionals, citizens of the world gather here and chat about all things writing. Hey there, this is Melissa Ford Lucken, editor for the Washington Square Review. I'm here today with Dylan Hoover, whose piece Aztec is in our Summer 25 issue. Hey there, Dylan.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Can you give us a little overview of your piece and let us know how did you come to write it?
Sure thing. So Aztec follows the story of an Aztec in the 1500s, around the time when the Spanish arrive in the Americas, and the main narrator is grappling with the aftermath and the loss that he encounters with the city that he's born in, which is Tenochtitlan. And the story is mostly concerned about grief and that continual emotion throughout. And when it comes to inspirations for this piece, I would say it really began last summer when I took a trip out west. I've spent most of my life on the East Coast, and something about going to Arizona, to California, and seeing the influence of Aztec culture, it really left an impression on me. And when I returned, I was compelled to watch documentaries, to immerse myself in the mythology of the Aztecs. And I suppose that's where this piece originated.
What was it about the Aztec culture that intrigued you so much?
Well, sadly, I think it's the fall of the Aztecs and seeing like this really incredible civilization that had all this technology, all these traditions. It's actually a sad thing to see a civilization like the Aztecs fall from this imperial regime that just stormed an entire civilization and toppled it. It's something that I was compelled to write about.
It sounds like a lot of unanswered questions. Yeah. So you decided to write the story. Did the story come to you right away? How did you shape the story?
Yeah, so I would say I think like when I returned from California, it took me like a few weeks because I went to like Barnes and Nobles. I bought a book on like the mythology. I dived into that. And then I also got another book on the conquistadors. It took me a few weeks to really like scan through the information and see, do I have a story here? And I'm a really big history buff, but I mostly focus on like European history and specifically like with England and Britain. So thinking about like this other like culture took time. But once I was able to find like a central emotion, because that's really what carries stories, is there has to be like a central issue. And for me, it was a sense of grief. And I think that was prevalent with like the fall of the Aztecs. So I compiled the story like that.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you and I were chatting about before we started recording officially is your use of dialogue. And I asked you, if you had kind of some thoughts about that, and you let me know that you do. So let's hear them.
Yeah, so I think with the dialogue in this story, as with any story, it's really important that the dialogue serves the characters. It gives the reader a strong sense of who these people are, what's at stake, and just in general helps lend credence to the world of the story. And thinking about this piece, I took a bold, I think it's a bold thing I would say with like this piece, I had to include the Nahuatl language which is like the native language of the Aztecs. And I knew like the reader would probably have to go like research most of like the translations, but I wanted to stay faithful like to the people, to this culture. I don't want to compromise that by using like English. And yeah, like just looking at a random section from the story, I also tried to stay faithful to like the main antagonist of the story, which is the conquistadors and Hernan Cortez and like the establishment of New Spain. And I just really wanted the story to feel authentic, like from each like snippet of dialogue. I really wanted it to feel complete.
Yep, that is one of the challenges of writing historically. You want it to have the historic vibe, but it also needs to be accessible to the reader. And I can appreciate what you're saying about it being a big decision, a bold move, just to go ahead and do it the way that you did it. Because whenever, as a writer, that's the only way to do it, right? Once you realize this is the way I'm going to do it, it's either going to sink or it's going to swim. You just don't know. You don't always know which way it's going to go. But that's just the nature of being a creative person. It's just got to go all in. And I think that the decision, it's a complicated decision. That's what I'm thinking about, is how many elements went into the dialogue. You got the historical part, the characterization part, the words, right? And then the way that it functions in the text. So it's doing a lot of different things. And that's what makes it, I think, so complicated.
And I think like specifically with historical fiction, you have to allot like a certain amount of creative license, like where you depart from the actual history. Like you want it to feel authentic, but at the same time, if you want the story to feel literary and rely on a central like emotional strand, then you have to give yourself the room to expand and maybe depart from like the actual history. But then also you want the reader to feel like, oh, this is actually something that happened in the past. So it's a fine medium.
Yeah, it's really complicated. I think that the dialogue also, as we're talking about it now, specifically in your piece, also serves as part of the setting.
Yeah, I think there's no way you can tell like the story without like thinking about where it's set, which like if the reader explores like the background of this piece, they'll find that Tenochtitlan was like it was the big capital of the Aztecs, and that's where like the Spanish arrived and met the Emperor Moctezuma. And it's very complex actually, Tenochtitlan, because it was set in like modern day Mexico City, which is a place that I would love to visit in the future. I haven't had a chance to, but yeah, it's actually kind of a tragedy though. Like what happened there, that there was this Lake Texcoco, and basically the Spanish drained it and like built on top of the ruins of the Aztec. And even to this day, like the Mexicans are finding like relics and like all these like treasures just buried beneath like the city. It's kind of mind-boggling. But that setting, Tenochtitlan, was like such a unique place that even the Spanish, when they arrived, they were completely shocked to find like these pyramids and all these structures that they thought like were only located in Europe or in the East. So it was quite impressive.
That is pretty wild. How does this story fit in with your other creative works?
I would say, I mean, the piece is obviously historical fiction. I think it's just, I have like a very vast range, like as a writer, where like I would say like all my like short stories rely on like these intense emotions, and I always strive to like make my work literary. But I think this piece is very like separate from um like those other works because it deals with like this unique period in time, and it's also like it's very strongly anti-imperialist, and a lot of my other work doesn't really deal with that. Like I'll go into further detail later, but I wrote this story called New China, and I presented it to my MFA workshop. It basically is like like an alternate history. So I guess like this one is a departure because that's more speculative of like what could have been, and then this piece is obviously trying to capture something authentic.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned workshopping and your programs. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your educational background and what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So I just recently finished my MFA in creative writing at the University of New Hampshire. And that took me like 2 years, and I really had such a great time like in workshop. Because they don't like in New Hampshire, they don't really give you like writing prompts like maybe that other MFA programs would. They sort of like expect you to present your own material for workshops. They go through it and you get feedback from like the entire class. And I don't know, I just really found it helpful. I began the program like not really understanding what like it meant to be like literary.
I'm
to,
laughing
like,
because
emphasize...
I'm laughing about because people tell me that all the time when I ask this question. They often say, "Well, I didn't really know what was going to happen to me in the MFA program. I had no idea what was going to go on, but it sounded fun, so I went and did it." So anyway, back to you. When you first started, what did you expect it to be like?
Yeah, so like because as an undergrad, I really put like I guess I feel changed in the sense that I put so much like concentration, effort, and emphasis on like world building, and on like the aesthetics of the piece, on I guess just like sort of the theatrics of like writing. I didn't realize there's this deeper like emotional like resonance that you can actually beg from your readers. And yeah, I think just also like having to revise your work, getting feedback from multiple different people, and also just I don't know, like all the helpful writerly like suggestions from like faculty and stuff. Like my one professor always had this rule of get in the story or get in late, get out early. Basically, because like writers tend to overwrite because they're trying to like work their way into the story, and you don't really need all that in the beginning. And that's part of the process of revision, where you rip off the first few pages and then you rip off the last, and there's your story.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize that like there was just so much like helpful suggestions and support that I think the MFA program is just quite wonderful. Mm-hmm. I think it really changed me as a writer.
That's great. You've mentioned a couple times the engagement that the writer and the reader have, and I'm wondering, where do you think? So, okay, let me back up. So it seems to me that with a lot of genre fiction or commercial fiction, that there's more supplied for the reader. It's maybe perhaps easier reading. And I don't mean that to disparage it. That's just the way it is. But with literary, you've mentioned a couple times giving more space for the reader to use their own imagination, use their own thoughts, and to do more work, essentially. Does that make sense to you? Do you see it that way with literary fiction?
Oh, absolutely. And I think because I really love historical fiction, I feel like sometimes, because it's a genre, of course, that other writers might like be more inclined to stick with just like straight up literary fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like want to pioneer something original with historical fiction. I want to strike a balance between historical and literary, and not like I don't want to get completely caught up with like the historical theatrics of like the period and the time. But I also realize you need a certain amount of that for the reader to invest in like sitting down and reading this entire piece or even a book. Yeah, so I just think it's very important to balance those two, because if you lean more, like strictly into either one, then you're sort of you're stuck with that, I suppose. Like, and not there's anything wrong with literary. That's what I'm aiming for. But I know that like sometimes historical fiction might just be dismissed as like genre, and
yeah, I think you're right.
People might not be interested.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't honestly. I think because history is very difficult to like comprehend, because there's so many dates, there's so many events. It's like a string. It's like an endless like. I think because it demands that people research, and that's kind of like an endless pursuit of like filling in the blanks. And I think it's even more difficult to write because you're constantly like making sure everything's like accurate, and then you have to make the hard call of where do I depart from like the actual history. It's a really tough call. But yeah, I think most people it can be dense to read, and it can also be extremely I guess yeah, I don't think it's a flavor for everyone. That's kind of why I want to like pioneer like almost like this hybrid genre between historical and literary. That way I keep the readers grounded.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fascinating. It is a puzzle. How do you work creatively within a pre-existing framework, right? You only have so much room to adjust things, and there's a lot of things you can't change. So I think that what you were talking about earlier with making use of the emotion of the piece would probably go a long way to achieve something there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like I think with this story, I really came back to like these central emotions of pain, of grief, of sadness, and having like following a single point of view with one like distinct narrator, and getting like these certain snippets of his life really like highlight those emotions.
I just was thinking that those basic emotions are something that any reader can relate to. So even if they can't relate to the historical background, obviously we can't because we weren't there, but we can relate to the emotions, and that's your way in, your way to connect.
Right, and I'm also hoping that the story like extends itself to like contemporary times, and like the anti-imperialist like undertone is translated into modernity.
For sure. You mentioned workshopping in your MFA program, and then I also know that you've done workshopping around the world. I'd love to hear about other places where you've done workshopping, and how do they do things differently, or what's the same?
Yeah, so that I think that calls to mind my experience when I was an undergrad. I studied abroad at Lancaster University for a semester as an exchange student, and I took a few creative writing courses there. And I think, well, it's actually interesting because, I mean, like no matter where you go, you can like I feel connected as a community of writers. It's a very unique like feeling that like we can all relate to each other. But then I think what makes like the international like experience different is that you kind of like part of the job of the writers is to experience, and like going international like you experience all these other like cultures, all these other traditions, and you kind of bring that with you to workshop. And I think that's what makes like the experience so different. And also, I think like specifically thinking about the UK, they're much more focused, I would say, on like genre and like yeah, I think the workshop itself is sort of similar, but I do think the US provides a lot of like a lot more support like from faculty when it comes to like suggestions and everything. I think in the UK it's more like what you pull from like the actual workshop with other students and your peers. So.
You said that they were more focused on genre. How did you come to have that awareness?
I think for me it was I wrote like a few pieces when I was there, and I noticed like with the supplement readings that it was more it was less literary and more on like different like genres. So yeah, I think yeah, it's definitely different on the front of like literary versus genre.
Okay. So it was mostly through the reading material that you noticed it?
Yeah, I would say through the reading material. I don't want to speak also for like all of the UK. I didn't attend every single university.
No, just what your experience was.
Yeah.
Did you find that the writing community was just similarly supportive of each other in the way that, you know, their willingness to read each other's work and that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's just the nature of writers that we're curious about other writers' work. We want to help others, but then we also like want help ourselves, and we need direction. And I feel like I received that, like in the international workshop. Yeah.
Other countries where you've done workshopping?
I haven't done any in any other countries now,
Okay.
but I do like.
You were in Greece though for something.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, well, that was actually like a writer's like summer workshop. It wasn't like through an actual school.
Okay. Well,
but I would definitely.
Yeah, let's hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did that. I think it was like 2 summers ago. It was right before I began like my MFA, and basically, it's like it's like a small community of writers that meets on the island of Thassos in Greece, and it's the same like with that experience, which is you take in like the culture of Greece. We went on all these excursions. We went and experienced like all that Greece had to offer, and we took that and applied it to our work. I mean, some people wrote about like their own struggles, like back home or in other places, because it was a collection of writers from like all over the world. But I think as a group experiencing Greece and the Mediterranean and taking in just like everything before us really helped give us inspiration to write.
Was there anything that stood out, especially when you were traveling around and experiencing different things?
Yeah, I noticed that. So, like before we went to the island of Thassos, we went to this city in northern Greece called the Saloniki, and I was the only one in the whole workshop that loved that city. Everybody was like, "It's too busy. It feels overcrowded. It's kind of confusing," and I'm the only one that I was like, well, I mean, I like the island, but I like Saloniki the best. And I thought that was kind of strange, but yeah, like a lot of, yeah, I think it made me like stand out in the sense that I could write about that city from a different perspective that probably they wouldn't. Yeah.
Did you grow up in the city? Why do you just have a thing for cities?
I'm not, yeah. So, I actually grew up in a rural area, so
Okay.
I prefer the city. Yeah.
Since you mentioned growing up in a rural community, how does that fit into your writing view, do you think?
Um, Actually, I've written a few pieces that I've included in my um like my MFA thesis, and I think it is like pertinent to my work, but I also don't like prefer to dwell on it. Like there's so much
Hmm.
like other things to write about. Like as I mentioned earlier, I'm a real like history buff, and I really like to dive in to like a certain period or time and then draw from that. But I have written about like my experience, and especially like in my childhood, of coming from that like rural area and how it like shaped me and gave
Hmm.
me like the proper motivation to go international, to go as far as I can and meet as many people as I can and take and learn from the experience.
Hmm.
And
I'm going to tease you and say, is that because there weren't many people to meet in the rural community? So you're like, I've met all these people. I'm ready to go out and see who else is out there.
well, I think there are people, but probably the wrong sort of people.
Right. I should tell you that I lived in a rural community for about 30 years, so I can relate.
Oh wow.
So I'm laughing at myself a little bit as well. Um, so, what kind of work are you doing currently?
Yeah. So I've had this project that I've been working on since the beginning of my MFA, and like I really found it's like the motivation to write it from like my advisor in the MFA, because I had the idea since high school, and I finally like I finally had the courage to write it, and it actually began in a very strange way where I took this screenplay class with my professor, and um, I decided to turn the story into a screenplay before anything else. And it's a historical fiction piece set in the American Revolution from the British perspective, because I'm very like intrigued by like British history, and I have been since I was really young. And I don't know, like I think with like current politics and everything, I really like wanted to take a jab at like the American mythology and ethos of like putting the founding fathers on a pedestal, because the more like I dig into like Tory loyalist literature from the British perspective, the more I
Mm.
find out how wicked and corrupt like the founders were, and I I think it's I think it's really interesting to see like an alternative lens of what the British perspective was like, because um, there are so many books on like the Patriots on the American side, like breaking into like the governor's home in Boston and like like gutting his home of like tar and feathering, of like people being forced, like Americans loyal to England being forced out of their homes to flee to Canada, flee to Britain, and just leave everything behind because, like, and uh, yeah, the Patriot insurrection, like, forced them out of this place that they came to respect. And it's really a story of exile,
Mm.
and that's what I want to tell with that piece.
Interesting. So it sounds like the alternate perspective would give you the opportunity to paint a different picture, right?
Oh, definitely. And I'm also hoping that it like challenges like everyone's like view on the revolution. Because to be honest, I really can't stand Hamilton.
Okay.
Like the musical, I don't really like. I'm not a fan of like the glorification of like the founders and the patriots. I think um, the way like Britain was so far advanced compared to America, like politically and socially, it's really sort of a tragedy that like a small like band of colonials like undermined like the colonies, especially for people that were actually rather content with like the current order of things. And like only one third of the population were um, like loyal to America, and then the other one third were patriots. But all in all, yeah, it's definitely interesting, like dusting up on this history. And I have like thousands of books on this, and I'm hoping to turn this into a novel in my doctorate. Um, yeah, that's what I'm going to spend the next 3 years writing is this novel. So,
Beautiful. That sounds great. And you're going to the right place to do it.
oh yeah.
If people would like to follow you online and watch your progress, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. My handle's at DylHoove96. And I tend to just use Instagram. So
Okay, beautiful. Well, we'll be sure to include that in the show notes so people can follow along and see what you're up to.
awesome.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for coming in and talking to me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for stopping by the audio town square of the Washington Square Review. Until next time, this has been the Washington Square On Air from Lansing Community College. To find out more about our writers community and literary journal, visit lcc.edu/WSR. Writing is messy, but do it anyway.